Welcome to A Quick Word, the video podcast of the International RAMPF Group. Here, we get to talk to interesting people about interesting topics. It's a pleasure to welcome today's guest.
Dylan Hubble, co-founder of the company ClimaTech Innovations, based in New Brunswick, Canada. Dylan, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for having me and looking forward to chatting here today.
Very cool. So I'm going to start with a bit of a tough question to start off with. How many business ideas do you think have been sparked while driving through the woods of New Brunswick?
I'm not sure, really. I mean, that's a good question, I would say. Really how our business got started was it was me and my business partner, and yeah, we used to drive all across our province here in Canada, and we would drive for hours and hours and hours. And you're with someone for so long, you just start bouncing different ideas around and talking about different ways you look at the world, really. And that's sort of where our business got started, was just driving for hours and chatting away and, thinking that we could do something different with the world.
Cool. So can you give a brief overview of your company's origins and what inspired you and your partner, Brian Williams, to start ClimaTech Innovations?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I guess around our area where we live, there's a lot of, I would call, sort of stagnant forests. So people that own forest land, but it's just really sort of sitting still. They're not managing it. And with all the talk and people wanting to take action around climate change, we really sort of identified an opportunity there that we could go and start to manage these forests and try and optimize them for absorbing as much carbon as possible. So that's where the business started with, was trying to figure out how do we just start taking action and doing something and start managing forests, both through planting trees and actually managing the standing forest as well. So that was the original idea. And we really wanted to connect and work with businesses and sort of help them along the process of taking real action on the ground and doing something. And when we started to go and talk with different companies, we realized people didn't really have a good understanding of what their own carbon emissions were. So that's where we saw an opportunity to work with all sorts of different businesses to help them to understand their carbon emissions and then go along the entire journey to actually go and do work on the ground to help mitigate things. So the business really started with me and my partner, Brian. We both had the sort of right skill sets, me with a technology background and him with a forest management background. And we just kind of wanted to start doing something and taking action and trying to make a difference.
What services does your company offer, and how do they benefit? On one hand, of course, they have to benefit the customer, because otherwise you wouldn't be a business. But on the other hand, I think, as you just said, one of your motivations is to actually really do something for the planet. So how do you balance the two?
Yeah, definitely. So what our sort of offering is, it's almost like a chain of different services we offer. So the first piece is doing that carbon footprint analysis, where we analyze a company and we use some international standards there to help them understand and calculate what their emissions are. From that analysis, we provide a set of different recommendations for a business to reduce their footprint. So different operational things that we identify. And then, we help a business go take action on the ground through supporting tree planting or the forest management piece.
Mm-hmm. And a couple of months ago, and that's the reason why we're talking to each other, you conducted a carbon footprint assessment for RAMPF Composite Solutions, our company based in Burlington, Ontario, Canada. Could you walk us through a typical process of such an analysis? Do you actually visit the company? Who are the people you talk to? And I suppose you have to then at one point sit down and crunch the numbers. Can you kind of explain how that process happens?
Yeah, for sure. So what we use is this international standard called the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which defines they call it scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, which is different ways to segment the emissions in a business. So what we did with RAMPF Composites was we did sort of a first call where we sat down and just, talked about the business, tried to understand what are the inputs, what's the work that gets done. And from there, we matched that up with this international standard to understand, what pieces of data that we're going to have to collect through this. And then, we went through a data collection process. We didn't actually visit the site, but we were able to get all the information provided on things such as, the electricity bills, employee commuting habits, even we looked at the raw materials coming into the process, how far those were transported, and so forth. And we took all that information. We got a process we've built to actually go and calculate everything. And then, we build out, it's about a 30 or 35 page report that we're able to provide back. And in there, it breaks down by those different scopes. What are the drivers of the emissions, and then those opportunities. So I guess maybe to explain sort of how that works, like that idea of the scope 1, 2, and 3 in the GHG protocol. Your scope 1 is your business's what's considered direct emissions. So that would be if the business is, burning natural gas, or if there's company vehicles, and it's the fuel that you use as you drive the vehicle around. From there, you have your scope 2 emissions, which is your electricity usage. And there's plenty of electricity usage in the manufacturing process, which was expected.
Yeah.
And so, scope 2 was considered indirect because there's still energy being used, but it would be at a power plant, and then you're sort of the beneficiary of that electricity. And then, your scope 3 is what's a little bit harder to analyze, but the biggest portion of a company's emissions. And that's all about your supply chain and your downstream and upstream effects. So that would be, the emissions for actually making the raw materials, the emissions of the transportation of those raw materials. We also looked at other composite materials, what happens, after 20 or 25 years at the end of the life of that material. It's going to be recycled or landfilled. What are the associated effects with that?
So, and how many different companies have you worked together with? That's a composite manufacturing. What kind of is it? Especially industrial companies or?
Yeah, so we've worked mainly actually with a lot of professional service businesses. So a lot of law firms and consulting firms.
Ah, really? Okay.
That's sort of been where, we're still sort of a young business getting started, I would say. But that's been the biggest flow of customers we've had. But the nice thing is about this international standard is that it really works for any business type in any location in the world. So it's the same process going through a law firm as it is to go through a manufacturing firm.
So what were the key findings of your assessment at RAMPF? And do you think the company is on the right track forward, going towards zero net emissions?
Yeah, I think that the company is definitely on the right track. Our analysis we did really, it's a sort of a point in time. We saw what the emissions are. So we'll want to do another analysis next year in the coming years to make sure that it's still on track and that things are, on the path towards net zero. But it's definitely, the first step is always measuring, and, you can't manage what you can't measure. So just by going through this process and understanding, where things are at is really quite good. Then as well, as part of this, we laid out a set of different recommendations. We kind of really set the table for things that could be done to reduce. So now it's a matter of acting on those recommendations, I'd say.
Okay. And what is the balance between you actually sitting in the office and working on the computer and actually being in the forest? Do you do the reforestation yourself? Do you have people who help you? How many trees do you plant?
Yeah. So my passion, of course, is being out in the woods and really getting out there and making doing things on the ground, I would say. So the analysis piece is kind of nice, but we've always seen that in our business as a way to go and drive more work on the ground and actually be planting trees and so forth. So myself, I've planted a few thousand trees this summer. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not the best tree planter, but get out there and do it. And then we have local folks that we hire that come and help us out. And
Mhm.
yeah, this summer we did, I think we'll finish out the summer with about 40,000 trees planted this year, and then
Wow.
looking to expand next year and so forth. So it's sort of a constant cycle of acquiring land and trying to plant as many trees as possible.
Two questions.
Yeah.
For me, I don't think I've ever planted a tree. Like, what's difficult about it? You just think you dig a hole and you stick something in it and it grows. Like, and do you actually, like, once you've planted the trees, do you have to like go there regularly and see how they're doing? And is it like a constant process during the whole year?
Yeah, so I guess the first part is I mean, if you have a big tree, right? Like you can dig a hole, you plant the tree, and that's good. But when we're talking about doing like sort of these large volumes of thousands and thousands of trees, you want to be quick as you go, of course, and you kind of want to be efficient because you're walking way far away from where your sort of cache of trees is. So how the tree planting is done is you wear a harness and you have about 150 trees on you. So you put 50 on one
Okay.
side, 50 on the other, 50 on the back. And then you have tree planting gun. It's called a potapucky. And so you
Mhm.
walk along and you're shoving that in the ground. You're putting a tree in and, making sure the tree's in there nice and you're walking on another feet or so forth. So you're lugging quite a bit of weight, which makes it quite strenuous, I would say. It's a tough job, like actually planting trees. Um, and then yeah, on the piece of the sort of upkeep and the management of the trees. So what we've been doing with all our tree planting is as the tree planters are going, we're having a GPS tracking app. And what
Okay.
that allows us to do is at the end of the day, we collect all of that information. So we can see exactly where the tree planters walked and have an understanding of how many trees were planted, where those trees really were, and the density. And what that allows us to do is manage those trees, for the next 25, 35, 45 years,
Hmm.
and know exactly where they were planted. We can go back in and do assessments to see what our survival rates were, and so forth. So, I mean, part of it is it's a lot of work to put it in the ground, and then it's sort of a waiting game, right, for the trees to do their job and grow on their own.
Do you own the land, or is it publicly owned land, or do you work together with like people who own the land, or is it all your own forest?
Yeah, so our business model is that we're owning the land itself. So we're
Mm.
out there actively acquiring the land. And we really think that's important that way we can ensure that the land stays sort of permanent, I would say, and that we can ensure that those trees are going to be there forever and that, if we were planting on someone else's land and they sold the land, we could lose access to those trees, for example.
Mm.
So yeah, we're out there. We're sort of our bottleneck at the moment actually is trying to find enough suitable land. So every day we're looking for
Okay.
more, is trying to find areas to plant.
And what kind of trees do you plant? Like I saw you have a video on your website where you say that you plant trees that absorb especially a lot of CO2. Um, what kind of trees are they?
Yeah, so they would all be sort of like native trees, some white spruce, jack pine, and so forth. And what we do there, trying to plant species that are, if you were planting trees solely for softwood production or to be used as lumber, you would want to plant mostly softwood trees and of specific species. But where we're trying to optimize that ground, we're doing a mix of planting softwood trees and hardwood trees. So I'd say we're about 20% or 25% of the trees we plant would be hardwood trees. I mean, it makes a challenge for us. They're harder to source and a little more expensive. But if you're looking at that piece of land and trying to really maximize the carbon that will absorb, you want to mix in these hardwood species as well.
Okay.
Mhm.
And one last question. What steps do you take personally to reduce your carbon footprint? And do you have any practical tips that you can offer for living, well, I suppose, a more eco-friendly lifestyle?
Yeah, so I guess I mean one way that I think about it, and you can sort of frame it, I would say, is this idea that we talked about your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So your direct emissions from your car, your electricity use, and then all of the stuff you buy and so forth. You can sort of think about your life in that same sense, right? So, I mean, of course, there's being vigilant and trying to turn the lights off every day, and all those sort of general tips that people kind of intuitively understand. But I mean, it's a big impact too, right? When you're buying things from overseas and they have to be shipped. So trying to shop local, avoid sort of excess consumerism if you don't need to be buying stuff. Because it's not, when I get the package from Amazon, I'm not really thinking about the carbon footprint of that coming all the way to my house, but it's definitely an impact, right? And something you really should be sort of conscious of every time you have an item show up, that there's the production of that, there's all the transportation of the goods behind it, that all would, affect your personal carbon footprint.
So sometimes less is more, I suppose.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for taking time to talk to us. It was really interesting, and we wish you all the best, and especially your company and what you're doing is really, really cool. So I hope your business grows just as fast as your trees do.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you. Great chatting.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and don't miss an episode.